And last month, MPs debated a private member's bill to ban pavement parking. Now we're getting plastered, thanks to the rediscovery of an ancient recipe. But this isn't booze. This stuff is responsible for keeping our ancient buildings standing for centuries. Here's Ben Robinson.
In East Anglia, we're lucky to have so many historic buildings to enjoy. Looking at how these ancient timber frames twist with time might make you wonder how on earth they're still standing.
Ancient timber frame buildings like those here in Lavenham aren't just beautiful, but they're also very, very strong. You see, what happens is they rely on the joints between the timbers, and as the timbers shrink and dry out, they pull the building together. That movement poses a problem. It means that all the other materials in the building have to be flexible enough to move with the frame.
I'm going to show you the ancient material that's helped preserve these houses and find out why it's found favour again with brand new buildings. Our story begins here at Needham in Suffolk in this quarry. Philip Pools comes here to collect chalk, the main ingredient for a lost recipe he's rediscovered. His company makes plaster for repairing old buildings, but he realised people were using the wrong stuff.
We got increasingly tired of having reports that new renders and plasters that had been replaced were failing. Indeed, one week we went to look at one house where a ceiling recently replaced had failed and fallen down in somebody's spare room bed on a bride's wedding dress. Another house where it had fallen down and just missed a baby's cot, and a third house where the ceiling had come down on somebody's dining room table. So we said, enough is enough. These plasters are quite different from what was up there before. Let's look at what was there before and see if we can't reproduce that.
Rediscovering traditional materials was vital. Modern plaster and cement used in the 60s and 70s isn't just making ceilings fall down, it's rotting whole buildings. Restoration specialist Mike Frost has uncovered the damage done to this medieval farmhouse near South Elmham in Norfolk.
You can see the cracking immediately up here. It's obvious, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's just sort of, it's failed to flex with the building.
Completely,
basically.
yeah.
Oh, you get some idea of the thickness of it.
Yeah, it's actually up to 5 inches thick there.
Oh, good grief.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's as hard as iron. Mm-hmm. So, and this is cement-based render?
A cement-based render, yes.
Yeah, and how long's it been there?
Well, probably since the 70s.
Oh, I can see the mesh underneath there.
Yeah. The timber's suffered because it's covered in a hard render, which is actually trapping the moisture, not allowing it to leave, and therefore creating a perfect environment for infestation of fungal spores and beetle, which are destroying the building.
And that hard render's only been on since the 70s?
I would have guessed, yes, yeah. 70s, perhaps late 60s, but no earlier than that. No.
And in that short period of time, it's causing that amount
of decay, yes. Yeah, it's like it's entombed, really. The extent of the damage on this piece of sole plate. This piece of sole plate was actually formerly here, and I was forced to replace it because it's literally beyond repair.
And you said forced to replace it. I mean, your natural inclination is to save everything that can be saved.
Always, always. To preserve the fabric, to preserve the integrity of the building. So, yeah, I replaced as little as I possibly can.
But this had just gone too far. And this is all the result of that trapped in moisture, that trapped in infestation.
Yeah.
And that's why trying to match the original materials is so important. Philip found that instead of including sand in the mix, our ancestors used chalk with the lime and animal hair. His Sudbury-based company now makes thousands of tons of the stuff. It's very different from the brittle, sandy material restorers had been using.
What was up there before is this sort of material, which is eminently flexible. It's like a piece of old carpet. And we analysed it, and we found that it contained not lime and sand, but lime and chalk. And it also contained a great deal of hair. Indeed, that piece of hair is what came out of a piece of plaster exactly that size. And that gives you a material which is hugely flexible. And we have here a piece that was made a few weeks ago, and you can see it's just as flexible as the old original. And indeed, if you wanted to make a really thin coat, you could make it even more flexible still.
Last year, 300,000 litres of this long-lost recipe was plastered across the country, including ceilings at the Tower of London.
There we go.
Oh, this is your test panel.
Mike showed me what the outside of the farmhouse will look like when it's restored with the right stuff. Detail really matters. The plaster even tells a story about the people who lived here.
The plaster goes on in one coat, 1 inch thick. The sparrow peck with a sunray or a shell pattern in the corners. It's quite a beautiful pattern, but very, very simple. Perhaps part of the corporate image of the Adair family, because it's to be found on a number of the houses that belong to their estates. I actually make my own tools and it's a case of trial and error, really, to be honest. I mean, in fact, this sparrow peck I made from a saw blade, which I modified.
And when this pattern was applied, this building was already very ancient. So
Yes.
basically, they were tarting the building up a bit.
Yes, they were giving it a makeover, yeah.
Lime plasters and renders aren't just for old buildings, they're becoming increasingly popular for new builds as well. This is a passive house and it's designed to be super energy efficient.
The haired chalk plaster doesn't just look great, it also helps to reduce CO2. So this house at Wickhambrook in Suffolk will be super eco-friendly.
What's it like to get on then?
Well, it is, as Philip said, like trying to put a cat on the wall sometimes. There's so many fibres in it.
You're doing something here that people have been doing for hundreds of years, rendering a building.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this is basically exactly the same material that they've been using for hundreds of years as well.
So why use a material like this that takes its inspiration from the past on a completely modern building?
The principles involved in the passive house are exactly the same as have always been around with a timber frame building. It's flexible, it breathes, and it's durable. It just allows itself to move with the building, basically.
These old recipes certainly have wonderful potential in new build where you require particular characteristics of breathability, sustainability. The materials that they're made from, apart from anything else, are much less CO2 is used in the making of them, which is an advantage. And as they cure, they also absorb CO2 from the atmosphere. So you've got a double benefit.
Who would have thought that plaster has such an interesting story? And once again, we've got so much to learn from the past, the knowledge and skills of our ancestors.